You want to know what I've been doing these past few weeks? Reading comic books. You know what has engrossed my attention? Comic books. You want to know what I want to talk about? This entire volume of Invincible comic books, written by Robert Kirkman and illustrated by Cory Walker and Ryan Ottley. Now before I begin, I just want to say that yes, I did want to read some Invincible comic books for Christmas because I was interested in watching the Amazon show. But now, having finished this entire book, screw the show. Because my opinion of these comics will ruin my viewing experience if I were to ever go on Amazon Prime and look up the Invincible show. Well, let's talk about this compendium itself, shall we? So, the premise of Invincible is that there is this kid named Mark Grayson, and his father is a very powerful superhero named Omni-Man. Now, this book contains issues 0 through 47, as well as some other issues that star Mark Grayson, such as a special created by Image Comics Publishing, the publisher of Invincible comic books, as well as a couple of collab issues where Invincible teams up with other superheroes. So in total, you have about 50 issues in this entire volume. Now, what does the actual story of Invincible focus on? Well, as I said, it focuses on Mark Grayson, a high school senior / college freshman who has to balance his school life with that of being a very powerful superhero fighting off villains and aliens and other threats to Earth and people he loves. So what we get is a coming-of-age story that is mixed also with a superhero story. And you mesh those together and you get a very, very intriguing comic book to read. Now, as I stated in the title, this book does contain a lot of weird stuff in it. And I'm not talking about weird as in gross, although that does happen for only one issue. I'm talking about weird because, one, there are a lot of superheroes with really strange really funny names, I should say. There's a lot of superheroes with really funny names and absolutely absurd powers. Well, for example, let's take the main character, Mark Grayson. His superhero title is Invincible because he's, well, invincible, even though he can get beat up really badly by some villains, as this book demonstrates, and I'll talk about that later. Then there's other characters like Atom Eve, who can manipulate atoms of objects to turn them into other objects. Her name is definitely not a play on words on Adam and Eve, the first man and woman that God created. And then there's other characters like Rexplode. I shouldn't have to tell you what his power is. And lastly, I'll just mention Duplicate, who, as her name implies, can duplicate herself. There's a bunch of odd superheroes in this comic book as well, and some of them do poke fun at other heroes in more popular publishing brands like DC and Marvel, but that would just take a lot of time, and I don't want to go over that right now. And I haven't even gotten to all the cyborg technology that's mentioned in here. And no, it's not as clean as you thought it would be, as well as super futuristic technologies involved, and the bizarre villains that are featured in this book. And yet, in spite of all these absurdities, I loved this book. I cannot remember a time when I was so invested in a main character of a comic book before reading this. Well, maybe Spider-Man, but that's another story. Every issue just felt so rich with characters, and the plots were so good. And I was just super invested. I was digging it. And the cliffhangers at the end of each issue were so well executed that I just wanted to read more, even though my brain was mostly tired and just couldn't take anymore. I would like to take a moment to just stop and talk about two of my favorite characters in this book. The first one is named Robot. Wow, what an obvious choice for a name for a character who is actually a robot. I picked this character because at first, I didn't really have any feelings for him. He just seemed like that cliched technical guy that you always include on a superhero team, like Cyborg in the DC's Justice League. However, Invincible takes this cliche of a robot on a superhero team in a different direction by making Robot the leader of the Teen Team, which is this book's parody of the DC Teen Titans. Every piece of dialogue coming out of Robot communicates his character. When he's just sitting there doing nothing, you know that his face, in whatever position it is in, whether it's up or down or sideways or just looking off into space, it's exhibiting an emotion, and thanks in part to the dialogue. But sometimes he'll just sit there staring silently, and you still know what he's thinking. I like those kinds of characters where it's just their face communicating and not their mouths. Yes, it's obvious he's intelligent because he's a machine, but he also has a heart. This book does give him some human qualities, even though he is as his name implies, a robot. He cares about people, especially one particular member of the team. He's flawed. He has a lot of trouble gaining the trust of the U.S. leaders featured in this book. And a lot of his conflict stems with him disagreeing with them over what should be done with his team and if he should actually be the leader or not. So what we get is a character that, although he is a machine, he still acts and operates like a human. Now, the second character I want to talk about is my all-time favorite, Alan the Alien. Yes, 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 give me more of this guy. When he is first introduced in the book, Alan the Alien meets Mark Grayson in space. And when they're in space, they can only communicate through speech bubbles in their head, thought bubbles, to be specific. It is through facial expressions that we get Alan the Alien's emotions and how we can tell what he's feeling. And boy, are they fun to look at. Again, this is a character who can only express through facial expressions. But later, he does get to move his face because he's walking on land. And when he does walk on land, you care about him because you've had some experience with him in space. You know what he is like, even though you've never actually seen him talk. Now, I do want to make this point also, even though I'm not really an expert on it, so I just found this an outstanding detail. But the art gradually improved with each coming issue. In the beginning, the art looks very rough, and it looks like a bunch of pencil sketches, and even the eyes just look like little black dots, and there's not a lot of detail to them. But as each issue progresses, the art becomes more polished, it becomes more clean, and there's not a lot of offshoot pencil scratches or marks, and it doesn't look like a rough sketch from a drawing book. It actually looks like a comic book, and it looks great. It looks fantastic, and it's a joy to look at. Now, if you want to talk about stories in this book, the best ones that are in this book, in my opinion, are the ones that feature Mark and his father. They are easily the best parts of this book due to the relationship that they share and the twisted sense of heart in it. Twisted, that's a key word, but I'm not going to say how it's twisted because spoilers. So everything that Mark goes through with his father and the conflicts that he has to face with his father and how Mark treats his father in all the highs and lows, that was really touching, and I loved how mature Mark is in his view of his father. When this book chooses to focus on other characters and plot lines, I started to lose a little bit of my focus. There are other side characters mentioned in this book besides the superheroes I mentioned, but none of them really have an impact on Invincible's character arc. For example, Mark Grayson has a friend named William. He's fine at first. He's just your average high school guy who jokes around and stuff. But then he just becomes a joke. He's constantly nagging Mark about their missing friend, Rick. And all that does is to tease future plot lines featured later in this book. I will say the one character who's not annoying is Adam Eve. She's a very sweet character. I really liked reading about her and the journey she goes through, the character moments she has. I really like that character. I can't wait to see what Robert Kirkman does more with her character. But anyway, William, yes. I hate it the way they treated him, and I hate the fact that he only serves to tease future plot lines. And I just hate it when writers do this. Not just in books in general, but like movies and stuff. I hate it when they just tease future plot lines because I just want to focus on the main plot. I don't want to get all this hyped up for future storylines. Make me care about the story that I'm reading right now. Then we'll talk about future stuff. Take notes. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse did that perfectly. See, I just want to read about Mark and his father. Please. Another nuisance I'd like to mention that really got on my nerves were two characters named the Mahler twins, whose only purpose in the book is to make jokes about who is the clone and who is the original, while they're building stuff for the villains they work for. So yeah, my point overall in stating this is that the book mixes way too many subplots into it while trying to tell the main story, and it gets really distracting and it kind of taints your reading experience. However, that small issue did not dilute my excitement in reading this book. I had a fun time and I really enjoyed it, as I've stated before. Would I recommend it to other people? Well, let's talk about that for a minute. So as I stated, Mark Grayson is a high school senior and college freshman in the comics that are featured in this book. So because of that, I believe Invincible is aimed at more an older high schooler / college age demographic, because there's a lot of violence to accompany the superhero fights that are featured in this book. And when I say violence, I mean blood. Lots of blood. The violence is very graphic, and it's very bloody. However, the book does not praise the violence. It only treats it as a consequence of the fights that the superheroes get in with the villains, especially when it comes to Invincible. As I said, he takes quite a beating, and there's a lot of shots of him where he's very bloody, and they have to fix him up. So I would only recommend this for like older people. If you got a kid under age like 13 or 12, they'd probably get a little disturbed by this. With that said, I love this book and I can't wait to read more Invincible comic book issues. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the content. Leave a dislike for good luck. And if you want to watch more of my videos, I have more comic book videos on my channel. So be sure to hit the red subscribe button down below. I will see you all in my next video. Thank you for watching.